Hi everyone, welcome to SGA's Civic Engagement and Social Action series. Today's conversation is sponsored by us, the Student Government Association, and is co-sponsored by the Office of Student Involvement. It's designed for students to learn about how they can engage in important issues that affect the world around them. The views in today's conversation are the opinion of the panelists and do not reflect those of the university. As part of the series, we're encouraging students to register to vote, and DePaul utilizes a platform called TurboVote to assist students in registering to vote no matter the state they live in. You can get registered by visiting DePaulTurboVote.org. In addition to getting registered, you can sign up to receive updates and reminders regarding deadlines for all elections in your area. With that, please join me in welcoming today's guest, Vanessa Cadavillo.
Thanks so much, everyone. It's so exciting. I'm so pleased to join you all today.
Yeah, thanks. We're so lucky to have you here. So the first question we'd like to ask you is, can you tell us about yourself and what you do in civic engagement and social action?
Of course. So my name is Vanessa Cadavillo. I graduated from DePaul Liberal Arts and Social Sciences in 2016. I was also in Student Government Association, started off as the first year senator, second year senator, then executive vice president for student affairs, and then was my president my senior year. And right now I live in DC and work for the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee in the finance department. So fundraising for Senate Democrats.
That sounds really exciting. What are maybe some highlights from your time in DC?
Yeah, so my goodness, I think it's safe to say since 2016, there's always been something mildly exciting here in DC. So I moved, I want to say 8 or 9 months after graduating. And I think similar to how a lot of folks are feeling after 2016, I felt like I need to be doing something. I need to be doing something contributing to our government. I think at the time I was finishing off being a paralegal in an estate planning and trust litigation firm, and then reached out to a friend, Matthew Von Ida, who's also in student government and graduated from DePaul. And I was like, I need to do something. I need your help. Where do I start? How can I get involved in politics? And he was working on Senator Catherine Cortez Masto's Senate race at the time, and said, have you ever thought about political fundraising? And I think everyone can agree you never think about political fundraising as a career. And so it's taken me for quite the ride. I think we've had last cycle was a tough time for Senate Dems. We came up a little bit short on seats, but we saw the House win. And that was such a great moment for us to see that we can make these changes in 2 to 4 years and elect members who are like AOC and have members who are so strong and represent younger folks' voices. So that's been kind of fun to watch. Fundraising has changed a little bit, especially in times of the coronavirus when we're not having in-person events. So that's been a little bit tricky. Usually, we have events with members, and I particularly raise PAC fundraising, which is political action committees. And I know that's a big scary word for people to hear oftentimes, but it actually is a way for employees who have a PAC to contribute, right? So if you give $5, sometimes your engagement kind of stops there. But for some corporations and labor unions and trade associations, it's a way for them to be a little bit more involved. And so it's been kind of fun learning these different things here in DC and different communities that are impacted by our government.
That sounds kind of like maybe the trajectory you have taken now isn't what you envisioned when you were in DePaul.
Oh, maybe not at all.
Yeah.
I think I forget, but what year are you all in?
I'm a senior.
I'm like a junior and a half, something like that.
Okay. Senior.
Yeah. And you're probably going to get those questions of, what are you going to do next? What's your next step? What job do you have lined up? And, at the beginning of my senior year, I was a little ashamed, like I didn't know what I was going to do next. And I think that's why I ended up working as a paralegal, because I was familiar with that. But I think the special thing about DePaul is you kind of don't have to know exactly where you're going to go, right? I think you can gather some skills and tools from your classes or your extracurricular activities. And no matter where you end up, at least I'm noticing now, 4 years graduated from DePaul, that there are experiences that I had in college that helped me kind of acclimate to a challenge or a situation that I might have not been prepared for. And DC was not in the cards for me originally. And that, through the DePaul network and student government, honestly, because that's how I met Matthew, that helped me to be where I am today. And I'm really happy with the job that I have and being involved in civic engagement.
It's nice to hear a change in trajectory worked out so well for you. Ari, you want to take it from here?
Yeah. So you touched on this a little bit because you mentioned SGA, but how can DePaul students learn from your experience, either like in a virtual environment or when quarantine ends, and as far as like getting involved with the kind of work that you do?
So my biggest thing, whether we were in quarantine or not, is reach out to alumni, whether they're in the same city as you or not. I think there are really great resources like our social media networks, like LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. That's how I started out. I would just reach out to people who might be in the job field that I was interested in, and I had no idea how to go about getting involved. And now I would say the one maybe plus side about having to do everything from home is you're doing it virtually. We're able to connect and we're all in different places right now. And so I think it is a little bit easier to connect with alumni or even people and companies that you're interested in getting involved with or, learning more about because you saw a job posting. I think it's a little bit easier through this virtual sense and through our social media networks to reach out to people. And I mean, I know for myself, if anyone's interested in my experience, whether it was at DePaul or beyond, I'm always happy to connect with folks. People paid it forward for me, so I really want to do that back. And I have obviously a soft spot for DePaul students. So even if our paths didn't cross, if I see a DePaul on your resume or your LinkedIn, odds are I'm going to want to connect with you as well.
Awesome, that's great. Also, we're wondering, so what do you think, or why do you think it's important for young people to understand civic engagement and social action and really get involved with all of that?
Yeah, I think we've gone through these times where we thought that we didn't have a voice and our activism didn't really add up to anything. But in recent years, you're seeing, the Parkland shooting activists really come out and speak not just about that incident that happened at their school, but how they're wanting to change the government and elect members who are going to go and do legislation and pass legislation for gun reform. And then you see activists with, toward environmental issues like Greta Thunberg. And you have these young people who are around our age. And I think before we kind of just thought it was going to be senators or representatives who are older. But I think it's so important to recognize that if we're not engaged in the process, those who represent us think that we don't care about it, or we don't want change, or we are kind of okay with everything going on. And I think that these younger figures who are around our age and even younger are showing that our voice does matter, and our networks and how far and wide our voices can reach do make an impact and can make changes and are making bigger changes than some of the people that we're representing. And so I think it's really important for younger folks to understand that, yeah, you might not think that the one post that you make on Facebook makes a difference because it's within your social network, but you never know. You might be you might see a family member might see something. You might have opened their eyes to a different perspective. And so I think it's really important that you might not see how your engagement or the way you're impacting other people might be adding up. And so I remember going back in college, we did the Monetary Awards Program advocacy work, and people didn't know what that was. And you just have to have these conversations with people one-on-one. And next thing you know, we have a group of students that weren't even part of student government who wanted to come down to Springfield and lobby with us to ensure that granting was passed and approved. So don't sell yourself short. You do have a voice and you are important in this whole civic engagement process.
I think young people are like, we're in a good position. We tend to like kind of feel invincible for a while, and like, you know, we can take on the world. And I think that gives us some ability to like really overcome some obstacles and make good change in the world. That's my hope, at least.
Absolutely.
And in that vein, since you graduated DePaul, what are maybe some obstacles that you've overcome?
Yeah. Oh gosh, so many that I would love to not relive. You know, one of the biggest obstacles was just simply moving to a different state. I lived in Illinois my entire life. I grew up in Skokie, so I didn't even visit DC before I moved here. So that was a really big obstacle, was, you know, trying to figure out, where am I going to live? What is my budget even for finding an apartment? Who am I going to live with? Am I going to live with strangers? And that was it was a big, scary change, which I know some people might experience just making that transition from high school to college. But for me, it was, you know, I was changing my job field. I was moving to a different city that I didn't really have family in. But I will say, the one thing that really did help me was knowing 2 DePaul alumni here in DC. And one ended up being my roommate, and the other one helped me get the job, or at least helped me kind of get my foot into the door. And so that was a really big challenge. I know last cycle, it was really hard to convince donors that we were going to take back the Senate, because there was such high momentum for the Republican Party. And so that was a little bit tough. And I think that seeing how that midterm election turned out, in terms, at least for the Senate, it's great for the House. It did provide some spark and energy for this cycle, seeing as how we're seeing people organize, and the fundraising that's going behind these, you know, the presidential candidate, Biden and Harris, and then these Senate races that are happening across the country. I think that people are frustrated that, you know, maybe they wanted someone who didn't have experience in politics before, and wanted that change that way and didn't see it, or they really saw the effects in many different themes, right? Like, maybe they didn't see that representation was being vocal enough when it comes to Black Lives Matter, or people aren't handling the pandemic and supporting families, especially, that have been greatly impacted. And so I think that those are really big challenges that I'm not only experiencing here in DC, but have been experiencing. I'm sure you all, in your own regard, have experienced these challenges. And we're all having this hard time, and we can admit it, hard time navigating this time. And no one has ever gave us a manual on how to go through these days. And so I'm glad that you all are maintaining some level of advocacy during this moment, because I know when you wake up in the morning and you don't really have that motivation, like, these types of outlets to get people involved and talk about really important issues is so important. And so thank you for that.
Yeah. I can definitely agree with, like, a lot of us facing some of those same challenges. And actually, I just moved to Chicago for DePaul last year, so I can kind of relate to your DC experience a little bit. So when I follow in your footsteps here in a couple of years, I'm going to look you up.
Please do. I'm so happy to help.
Definitely.
Cool. All right. I feel like I have tons of different questions. You talked about so much, which was so great, but I definitely do appreciate, like, the point that you brought up, and how we've seen just, like, the power of, like, community organizers, or just, like, local organizers, and not always, like, bringing power to just, like, our elected officials. So one question I have, just because I'm a political science student, so I get kind of excited about this stuff, but I feel like throughout this, like, recent, like, surge of the Black Lives Matter movement, we've seen, I guess, especially among my peers and the youth, like, using social media as a way of, like, activism, which is really great. And I know that it's also been met with just some negative pushback, because people think that it's just performative or whatever it is. So I guess, just, like, as a young person that's also, like, uses social media as an outlet to, like, be an activist, I guess, like, how can we move past just, like, the performativity of like activism and I don't know, I guess touching more on like the power of like organizing and actually getting out there and doing the work.
That's a really great point. And, I think I struggle with this sometimes because I'm like, could I be doing more? And I think when you look at who you're following and who's following you, it's probably pretty safe to say that you all kind of have similar mindsets, right? And everyone's kind of posting the same thing. And I think that what would take it to a different level. It's not necessarily, going out on the streets. For some, yes, that is what it is. It's not always giving money to an organization. It's having those harder conversations with people who don't think like you. I mean, like I said, back in 2016, I was not having the same mindset as some of my family members for the 2016 election. We had family who were definitely wanting Trump to be the president, and I wanted Hillary Clinton to be president. And while it was so frustrating having those conversations, sometimes it was more eye-opening than anything. Like, yeah, I'd be stomping up to my room or something afterward, just like not wanting to talk to anyone, but kind of understanding why someone has this mindset and doing your job. If you believe that this is important and you need to kind of give them a different perspective, let them know, give them some facts, give them links to look up, give them literature. And I know after all of these marches, I watched a couple of documentaries just to kind of give me some more context and some more, resources to be able to have these conversations with friends or coworkers, or even strangers that you just happen to come across. I think that is the best thing that you can do in these situations, because unfortunately, seeing as it hasn't stopped and people have continued to maintain a not so positive mindset on all of these situations. I think the best thing is taking your activism, maintaining in any way you want it to, but engaging in those difficult conversations, because that is the way that I think you're going to be able to change someone's perception of a situation. And sometimes you don't, and that is what it is at the end of the day. But I think you end up learning that not everyone had the same upbringing as you. Not everyone has the same mindset as you. And I think that that's a powerful tool to bring with you as we get older. I've even noticed within myself that sometimes my perception of things have changed over the years as well.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And the tricky thing about those hard conversations is that sometimes when it gets to a point where they're really emotional and I guess like fueled by a lot of rage, there becomes a point where the conversation is not on the issue itself, but then you start attacking the person, or it just becomes very disrespectful. And so I guess, what are some tips that you have from preventing that? Because then, of course, there's no conversation to be made if two parties are just screaming at each other, right? And I know that I need to work on it as well, because sometimes I let my anger get the best of me or my emotions get the best of me. So I guess, what tips do you have in making sure that those conversations are productive?
That's a great question. And I can admit, I don't have the perfect solution to avoiding those situations. I know when sometimes my friends and I have differing opinions on things, luckily we're kind of all resource driven, right? We'll trying to find an article or trying to find a couple of legitimate tweets to share with each other to open each other's eyes a little bit. Sometimes we do reach that gridlock where, I'm standing on one end and my friend's standing on another end. And unfortunately, luckily for us, we're friends, so we don't want our friendship to end in any bad blood or anything. But it is hard to reach that point. And I think it takes a lot of self-strength to just say, you know what, I agree, we're going to disagree, or we agree to disagree. And that's a hard pill to swallow, because I don't know about you, but most times I want to be right in a situation. And that makes it longer for that point to actually be reached in a conversation, for me at least. But I think having that strength to say, you know what, we have differing views. That's okay. I still respect your opinion. I think that that's something that at least I've learned in DC is you're going to, I've met people who have similar political views as me, but we're on this like spectrum of where our views lie. And if it's not going to matter in the next 5 minutes, 5 years, then why am I going to stress out about it? Is kind of how I think of it these days.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of the times when we have these conversations, we kind of have to leave our pride at the door, or else we won't learn. But of course, that's hard because, like you said, I also like being right. But I also wanted to go back to Ari's question about like using social media as a platform for activism. Something that it reminded me of was in the Philippines. I don't know if anyone's aware of what's going on there with their administration, but they have this like anti-terror bill that was passed. And one of the things that covers is that it makes activism, it deems activism as like terrorism. And even posting something on social media can be deemed an act of terrorism. So I think that just shows how powerful your platform on social media is. If this whole regime, they don't like it when you use the word regime, but when this whole administration is attacking even the use of social media as a source of activism. So I just think that that's also powerful as well, but also taking it a step more and not just being performative and showing like, oh, I'm doing this just because everyone else is. But yeah, that just reminded me of the Philippines. Like if this whole administration is trying to shut it down, then that just shows how powerful.
I mean, that's the same thing with TikTok. Who would have ever thought that TikTok would be used as a tool? I would have never. And that's, again, young people thinking of just these like strategic ways that are working, honestly, because it's sending messages to those up there that we need to shut it down. We need to get rid of these apps or these, liberties to be able to voice your opinion. And that is what's a little bit scary, is because they are seeing that social media and younger people's activism is actually making an impact.
Definitely. Marcus, did you have another question?
Yeah, so you've had an impressive journey so far, some changes you've adapted to really well. What do you see your next challenge being?
Next challenge is finding a job after this current election cycle. I think something about working in politics, or if you decide to work in politics, is it's very cyclical. Every 2 years or every 4 years, you're kind of looking for your next opportunity. So I know for me, that's going to be a big challenge, just because I'm used to, now at least, I'm used to event-driven fundraising, and we are doing everything through Zoom, and everyone is so zoomed out, or, virtually zoomed out. And so that's going to be different in terms of how I look for my next opportunity. I think also it's going to be dependent on what happens in DC. If the White House and the Senate and that House are all Dem majorities, that's going to be really great for me, hopefully. But if we, lose one there, I think that's going to change a little bit of the dynamic and the opportunities that open up. So that's going to be a huge challenge. I know for the next few months, my biggest priority is electing a Senate majority, and we're going to have some hurdles. I think what's so funny about working for the committee is you get to learn a lot about the different candidates and the incumbents that are running, as opposed to when you're working on one race, you kind of are just focused on that one candidate or that one person. And so are some spectacular candidates that are running in states that we probably thought were reaches before, right? Like South Carolina, we have Jamie Harrison running, and no one would have ever thought that South Carolina would be in play. Lindsey Graham is so popular in that state, and he hasn't actually had a strong contender until now. And so he's a great candidate. And we have the Georgia seats. We have John Ossoff running in one, and then Raphael Warnock running in another. Those are a little bit different because the one that Raphael Warnock is running in is a jungle. So all the candidates are on a ballot, and basically the two that have the most will go on to the election, I think in December or January. I forget the exact date. So those are going to be some challenges that we see. I mean, it's going to go on to, Maine and Iowa, North Carolina, literally all the states that we have such great candidates in, is seeing seeing candidates who don't win, potentially. That's going to kind of break my heart a little bit, because, they've, not only are they and their families working so hard, but they've cultivated these strong teams and people who are so excited about them. And I think, again, going back to 2016, I think we all know what that feels like, to be so excited about someone and then seeing what happens when it doesn't really pan out in that way. But that's why it's so important. You all getting the registration and getting the vote out there is really important. And if I could make a quick plug, our committee put together the Help Flip the Senate website, which basically outlines all of our candidates, their websites. You can volunteer, you can learn more about their campaigns, you can donate to them. It's a really great resource that the DSCC created this cycle, so that folks have the one place where they can find the way that they want to be involved with our Senate races. So it's flipthesenate.com. And if anyone's interested, you're more than welcome to go on there and kind of learn more about some of our candidates running for election this cycle.
Cool. Just one quick question I got to ask. Either presidential or Senate races, is there a state or two that you're more excited about or paying more attention to than others?
Oh my gosh, you're putting me on the spot here. Well, I am such a huge fan of Barbara Bollier in Kansas. I know that one's a little bit of an underdog, but we haven't, her story is a little bit different. She was originally a Republican, and she was in the, I think, state Senate, state house. So sorry, I don't remember at the top of my head. So many candidates running, but she's also a doctor. And we had her at one of our events, and she was just so warm, so smart. And I honestly forgot for a second that she was just a candidate. I thought, oh my gosh, she just reminds me of like one of the other senators. She's ready to get the work done. And I think her background has provided some really great exposure for her in the state. And with Kansas having elected a Democratic governor, I think that could be really, really good for her. I know in the House, I'm really excited about Gina Ortiz-Jones. She's running in Texas, and I'm forgetting the district number, but she is Filipino, and I always struggle to find Filipino representation here in DC or even across the country, and it would be really exciting to have a House member who is Filipino, and I, would really love that for her. I want her to win.
Especially in Texas, that would be awesome.
Especially in Texas. She was so close last cycle, but I think she can do it.
Cool. I'm all out of questions, and we're already approaching 30 minutes, which went by so quickly. Ari, Marcus, do you guys have any other questions you guys like to ask?
I mean, I have 1,000 more, but
Okay, well, thank you, Vanessa, for joining us, and for everyone who's watching, we really appreciate it. SGA, Student Government, we meet weekly on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. So if you want the link to join or are interested in learning more, please follow us on social media so that you can see how to get more involved. It's right there on the bottom at DePaul SGA. And also remember that, first of all, remember to vote. That's why we're doing this. Second of all, remember to join us next Tuesday as we interview another panelist. So have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.